'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello and welcome to the Salt Strong live stream and podcast. My name is Rich Natoli. I'm the regular host of this show. And my co-host, Ed Gobo, is not here this week. I think he's at a baseball game with his son. So family comes first. He's there. But we've got on tonight one of the Salt Strong coaches. We have Matt Lanier coming on, and he is going to be talking with me about tournament preparation. 'Tis the season for fishing tournaments, and Matt has had some really great success along his tournament trail so far this season. So we're going to bring Matt on. And before I do that, I do, as always, want to go through and thank the people that are in the chat right now. And just so that you guys know, I hear it every once in a while. Hey, you missed me. Well, there's about a 5-second delay between chat and me live. So it's about 5 seconds behind. So if it's at the end there and you get it in late, I may miss you. But thank you, everyone who's joining us live. We've got James Flynn, Larry Matzinger, Captain LL, Rob Woodmeyer, MR Johnson, Tad Drummond, Cody Jackson, and John Hutchinson. How you guys doing? There are dozens more of you in there, but you haven't chatted, so I don't know you're there. But welcome, everyone, and welcome to everyone listening to the replay on the podcast. I'm not going to do a big introduction on this one. This is all about tournaments, so I'm going to bring on Matt right now. Matt, how you doing, man?
Doing good, buddy. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, and I'm really looking forward to this topic because I have a tournament coming up in a couple weeks, and I have my own thing that I do to prepare for a tournament and to go out and fish the tournament. I don't think I take them nearly as seriously as you do, though. And anyone that saw the thumbnail for this knows just how serious Matt takes it. And that was one of your smaller checks that you were holding up from this past weekend. But you take it seriously. You go out to win. I just go out to hang out with people in the kayaks on the water all day. But there's definitely a way to do it and a way to prepare if you want to be successful. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. If you have the desire to win, and the intent to win, there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. It's not just the performance on the water. That's the culmination of everything coming together.
Yeah. I'm thinking about taking I don't know if I'm going to take this first one as seriously. I just don't know. I've always fished it for fun for the past several years. And, but at some point I want to try to win one. Kind of go out and do my own thing and just go out and just fish hard all day, come back exhausted, and hopefully be somewhere up at the top. I think the closest I came was a tie for fourth. And it wasn't a very impressive tie for fourth either. The two of us were kind of looking at each other like, well, we lucked out because it was not a great day.
Well, I'll be honest with you, man. Some of the events are actually, most tournament events always seem to fall on days with just absolute terrible weather. So a lot of times you'll actually be really surprised what can win a tournament, because, if you got a tough day and it's a bad day and you can bring any two fish to weigh in, that's a good day. But you said that, there's something I do want to say, to, kind of, not to correct you, but I do want to point out, you said you want to go and just kind of hang out and, just have fun. That's been my goal from the beginning.
Yeah.
I got into tournament fishing because some buddies of mine did it. And that meant that all of them were going to be together at the same time, to fish the event. And I was like, man, if that means, we can all fish together, I'll fish the tournament too. So that's how I got into tournament fishing. I don't ever go out with the intent to win. I go out with the intent to do my best. That's always what I go out to do. I don't ever go out to win or, place or win money. It's not about cashing a check for me. I go out to do my best and, you know, perform at a level that, you know, I feel like I'm capable of, and have fun. If I'm not doing those two things, doing my best and having fun, then I shouldn't be there, because that's why I started it. And that's why, you know, I want to keep doing it. It's not about a check at all.
So let me give you an example of I totally understand what you're saying. The first time I did the tournament with a bunch of guys, we all met at the kayak launch. A couple guys decided to do their own thing. I think they were really focused on just doing their plan and trying to win. And we met up at a launch and we went out, and it was like this little flotilla out there. You know, I mean, 4, 5, 6, I don't even know how many of us there were. I'd have to count, but a lot of kayaks. And we ended up just pulling up on a sandbar around lunchtime and hanging out for about 40 minutes, 40 minutes, just having our lunch, making fun of each other, and then jumping back out there. We got a little bit more serious the next year, I think. And I don't know, maybe this year I'll really fish it hard. But to me, you know what that means, Matt, is if I'm fishing it hard, I know the way that I fish when I'm really focused. And I don't know that I'm the most fun to be with, because I may just pick up and not even realize what I'm doing. And the next thing I know, I'm a mile away back in a marsh area and nobody knows where I went. So, you know, it ends up that I end up fishing by myself. So I do that a lot of times when I have a video I need to do. I'll just go alone. Otherwise, I go with a bunch of people and I just kind of like, I don't know. It's more casual fishing at that point. You know what I'm saying? As somebody who makes videos.
Absolutely. I totally understand all of that. And it's funny you say that about, you know, your first event or whatever. My first event, you know, you said y'all pulled up on a sandbar and hung out. My first event that I won, I was off the water at 10:30. And went to go eat barbecue with one of the insider members, Robert Courtney Ashburn, that I'd fished the event with. We both had really good fish, you know, and we were like, you know, it's storms coming in, some really bad lightning, you know, and it was going to come right over us. So, we actually fished till the last minute we could, which really, we only had a few hours on the water, and then, you know, booked it through the storm, back to the ramp, went and ate barbecue, and then went to weigh in, you know, a few hours later, to go find out that we had both, you know, been in the top, while everybody else just kind of roughed it out in some tough conditions. And I was like, man, tournament fishing's easy like that, man. We should just do this all the time. Why doesn't everybody do this? And that's when I learned, at my next event that, that's not how it goes. That's not at all how it goes.
It's definitely not how it goes. I'll say that the one thing that I've learned from tournament fishing is if you go and you fish it, whether you weigh something in or not, you should really hang out afterwards, you know, at least up until the awards, because you get to meet so many great people just hanging out afterwards, get to hear all their stories, and you'd be surprised at how small the fishing world is, and who knows, you know, how many people you know in common. And I've noticed that there hasn't been a tournament that I've gone to where I haven't seen a whole bunch of people that I didn't expect to see, and ended up becoming good fishing friends with them after. So I'll say that. But we're not on this to talk about why would you fish a tournament and how we fish them and how I don't fish them. We want to talk about preparation for it. I know a lot of people that watch this, that listen to this, they do have interest in, or they do fish tournaments. So I want to kind of go through the process, and I'll throw in my process along the way, but I'm going to kind of set it on you to start with. So, I'm guessing you have a tournament this upcoming weekend. Is that correct?
It is. Okay. I don't know how you knew that. Actually, the main trail for the Florida Redfish Series, it's actually on pause until September when we have our 2-day championship. But they do have a different summer series, which is like half-day events where our actual multi-species event. The main series event is only redfish. But this event will be redfish trout. So it's a multi-species event that I have coming up this weekend. So what I normally do for one of those might be a little bit different than what I do for, just a redfish
Right.
species event.
Yeah. And up here, in the mid-Atlantic, quite often the tournaments are, let's say it's a fluke tournament. So all you're catching are fluke or flounder, whichever you want to call it. However, there are other divisions. So there's the Calcuttas, which will often include other fish, so it could be, the one that I'm fishing in a couple weeks, if I recall from last season, there was the sheep's head entry as well. So there was the sheep's head, and then there's the kids. There's all these different divisions, but a lot of them will also have bluefish or striped bass, like the Fish and Paddle out of Maryland, which is absolutely huge. They have multiple things that you can enter. So I think multi-species is a good way to go. So you're about 1 week out from there. What are you doing right now, if anything, to prepare for next weekend?
Yeah, so that's a good question. What I'm gonna do is right now, truthfully, if it was a new area or somewhere I'm not familiar with, I already know where I'm gonna go because I kind of know this area pretty well. But so what I'd want to do, say week before, I'd want to try and find, say for this multi-species event, I'd want to think about what those fish are doing this time of year, first and foremost. Since it's a 2-species event, I'd want to think about, number one, where are redfish at this time of year? Where can I find them? Number two, where are trout at this time of year, and where can I find them? And when those two things aren't tough, but when you talk about where can I find a upper slot redfish and a over slot trout, a upper 20 trout, that's where you start to really get into fish biology. You really got to know what those fish are doing throughout the year. In the May spawn, we usually have a really good trout bite, with some really big trout. But as we start getting into these warmer months, those big trout are going to be a little bit harder and harder to find, and more importantly, harder to catch. So you got to know where to look for those fish and when they're going to be there, so that you can really just optimize your chances at getting those species. So that's what you're going to want to think about first. Where are those species going to be at, and what type of area? And then from that point, I'm going to get on a map, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on map analysis. Now, you're talking about, what am I doing the week before? The week before I'm on the water. What I'm telling you I'm doing, at that moment, thinking about where the fish are at and then going to map analysis, I'm going to be doing that a month out. I'm going to be doing that 3 weeks out. I'm going to try and stay up to date on those fish in that area as often as I can. I want to know where they're moving or what they're doing as much as I can. If I can be on the water every day, I will be that. And that doesn't mean necessarily out there, chunking lures and catching fish. I'm just looking for where they're at, man. I'm just pedaling until I spook something and just see if they're close to the shoreline. Are these fish out in 3 foot of water, or are they, what are they doing? So the preparation starts well in advance, trying to think about where those fish are going to be moving in and out of, what stage, of their migration, their, seasonal migration they're going to be in.
Right.
That's going to be first,
so the one thing that you do get, if there was the insiders specifically for Salt Strong, you do get the trends every week, and you get the game plans. I'm sure that those are going to help. But the one thing that I find interesting, so the pre-fishing part of it, so you said you're just out there just looking, right? That's difficult for me up here because I can't look and see anything, because typically, this is a fluke tournament. Typically they're going to be, right now, actually you can't catch them in 3 or 4 feet of water, but with the way that the heat's been the past week, it's probably 15 to 30 feet of water. So let's say you're in that type of situation. It's really murky. You're not seeing anything. how are you pre-fishing the previous week? What are you doing? Are you going out and just pounding an area, or are you just using search baits? Are you dialing in the specific lures? What's your goal for every spot that you pull up on when you're out there in that kayak?
Good question. So one thing I want to try and do, so there's stages of, it's weird. There's stages of my on the water scouting. The first stage is, kind of a shotgun approach. I like this spot, this spot, this spot, this spot, this spot on a map, and I'll kind of, this is just based on what they look like on a map. And then once I figure out what the map looks like, then I'm going to play my conditions. Just like you said, with the insider membership with Smart Fishing Spots, you can see what the weather's going to do days in advance, so I'm actually going to play the conditions and use the conditions to narrow down, from that shotgun approach, then I'll pick 3 or 4. And when I go on the water to look at those places, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time to dial those places in on my first shotgun approach on the water. When I'm hitting those first 3 or 4 places, I'm not trying to dial nothing in. Even if I know there's, if I know there's fish there, that's a little different. But if I'm just chunking and moving, trying to find productive zones, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm staying on my pedals and I'm just going to keep moving. I'm going to keep a search bait in my hand, whether that, one of my favorite search baits is topwater. It doesn't matter what time of day it is. And for me, especially when I'm searching for a tournament, topwater triggers a strike from big fish no matter what time of day it is. So, and if they miss, fine with me. I didn't want to sore lip them anyway. I just need to know where they're at, where they're hanging out at. So, a lot of times when I'm scouting, go out there with a topwater with no hooks on it, just, and they'll blow up on it all day, and you just keep going and cover water. And then, once you've tried a few places, you figure out which one's most productive for you, where you found the most action. Are we going have you found a place where, where a couple solid big fish are at? Or, have you found a place where there's a lot of numbers and you feel like you could find a couple good ones in it? You know what I mean? That's usually where you finally get down to the decision making. That may be a little ahead of myself, but, definitely when I first hit the water, it's about covering water, finding productive zones. And a lot of people don't understand there is a lot of eliminating unproductive water. People don't understand how important that is in tournament fishing or just fishing in general. People think, y'all told me to use the Slam Shady and I'd catch fish. Well, what's more important than the Slam Shady is finding fish. You got to find where the fish are at. And I know a lot of times people watch our videos and they think, oh man, they're out there just slaying them. They're always on those fish. But what they may not see is the 3-4 hours that we just covered miles and miles of grass line and had nothing. But finally, we found an area where it just clicked, and we figured out the trend and we were able to, put the puzzle together moving forward. So, covering unproductive water is right up there with, at the top of the list of important things when you're scouting for a tournament, because you don't want to be out there tournament day fishing in a zone that nobody's caught fish at in 5 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the only way to know that is get out there and go fish it, So yeah, covering water is super important first thing and foremost.
One thing that I've done is this last week, as an example, I went out to an area. I actually went out with an insider and we hit the water for a day. We traveled 16 miles in the kayaks that day and we were covering a lot of water. We had this one spot, or not one spot, this one area that we wanted to check a few spots in. And we wanted to fish outgoing tide, but that was at midday. So we spent the whole morning kind of scouting around, covering different types of water. And I'm thinking the whole time, this is going to help me in a couple of weeks because the tides are going to roughly sync up. So let's hit a ledge, let's hit deep, let's hit shallow, let's hit the edge of flat. And boy, did I have a terrible day. Matt, I'm telling you, man, He outfished me like crazy. It was to the point where we were switching over to striped bass and bluefish. And I looked up at him the one time. He was way up a creek. I started waving him down. I'm like, there's striped bass all over down here. And I'm ready just, I'm not even putting my line in the water because they're all over. He comes down, bang, bang, bang. He's nailing them. I didn't get one. I got one bite the entire time. I said, what is going on? We're 3 feet from each other. He's bailing them. But yeah, we covered everything, and then on the way back in, we hit all these different types of areas back in the marshes, and nothing worked out until of course, it was him, pulls in one fluke that was short. And I was like, you know what? I learned a lot of places that, we're in a trend change right now in the backwaters. So, especially where we were, which is around where this tournament is, the trend is changing over. It was lights out in these areas and now it's not. So, I learned a lot of things to cross off the list. So this week when I head out, I have a whole different list of types of spots that I'm going to hit. And my goal is to go alone this time and just cover, the same type of territory, probably in about half the time though, and just drop the lures, search it out, see if I'm getting anything, maybe even drop a camera. That's one good thing about doing content for Salt Strong. I got all the cameras and they're all waterproof and I can drop them down and look underneath and see what's there. But yeah, it's a great point though. Eliminating spots is a big part of it. And you brought up the one point earlier where you mentioned, do you want to get a lot of fish and try to pick a big one out of there? The one thing that I do want to say is if you want to win the tournaments, you have to stop fishing the way that you probably typically fish when you're out on the water. So, if you're constant, and this is big for mid-Atlantic fluke fishing, especially boat fishermen who are admittedly somewhat limited in where they can get their boat, right? So they can't get into all the spots I can, but they drift the same channels over and over and over and over, and they're throwing back 35 short fluke throughout the day, and they're wondering why they're not getting the 25-incher that they're really looking for the tournament. It's because they're drifting the same spot that holds all those 30 shorts, and there are no 25 flounder in there. So you have to really look at the spots, and you have to break them down because otherwise, you shouldn't expect anything different. If you typically get 25 to 30 shorts, you're going to get that, and you may luck into a big one. So I personally take the approach, I want a big one or I don't want anything. That's it. I'd rather get one big fish that has a shot to weigh in and do something. These are single fish tournament, Matt, for the kayak divisions. So one single big fish, that's all I need. One bite, one landing all day, and I'm good.
Yeah, I know what you mean. When I go out and find an area that's got some good numbers of maybe, so for me, it's redfish. If I find an area that's got some decent, lower to middle 20-inch redfish, I may take a day to try and dial that area in and see if there's bigger fish hanging on the fringes,
right?
Or if there's bigger fish mixed in that just are more picky, and a lot of times that's what I feel like makes me successful in some of those situations. Because, sometimes I know places where I can go and find big fish. Like I actually made this call in the St. Augustine tournament, and it may have came back to bite me, but in the end, fishing in the St. Augustine area on, I may butcher this name, but the Guyana River, I'd found some solid fish, some big fish, winning fish, but I'd only found a few of them, and I found them at a very specific part of the tide cycle. Yeah. Like that's the only time I could find fish there, and that's the only time those big fish showed up. So I could have gambled on those, and I could have went there and hopefully in that short 45-minute window frame caught two of those big fish and won. But I gambled and went somewhere else where in practice I'd found consistent bites of low 20s and a couple big ones mixed in that weren't eating, but they were there.
Right.
I saw them. I knew they were there. So that's where I took my chances and went. Turns out I never got any of those small 20s that I'd gone there to find. I only got one 26-inch fish, but sometimes it's like that. It was a tough day, blowing over 20 and just, brutal and raining on me all day. It never stopped raining, not once. It's terrible. It's terrible. I'm so glad that day was over.
That's how the
and
weather.
I got my truck stuck. That was that day. I got my truck stuck on the side of St. John's River, man, and all that mud, man.
So
that was terrible.
I know we don't have a picture right now, but I want people to know when Matt says he got his truck stuck, it was like up to the floorboards. Like, I don't know if you could open the window very easily, or not the window, the door. I mean, it was in there. It was solidly. I thought it was entertaining when I saw the picture, to tell you the truth.
If I can find the picture. Yeah.
All right, everybody. You can see this. I'm sorry, Matt. That's just hilarious.
It was just about up to the side of the door, man. It was pretty tough, but it's okay, I guess. But here's what's crazy, and you talk about tournament prep. Finding that place to launch at took some preparation too. Like I probably spent 2 hours one day in my truck just riding around looking for a spot that I could get my kayak through. Like I needed a hole in the side of the road, and that had worked out. Pulling my truck back down there to load my kayak, off and in, had worked for me one day already, and it worked for me to launch out of. But I guess because it had been raining all day and it had never given time for that ground to dry out and harden up a little bit, when I came down with the truck the next day thinking it was just going to be like it was. Yeah, no kidding. Like it was the day before. I was wrong. That pluff mud was unforgiving. But I got 4-wheel drive. We kicked that thing on the gear and we got out of there.
Yeah. Well,
but yeah, it was tough. It was tough.
I find that a lot of my preparation goes into where am I going to launch in relation to those tide cycles, because I want to create a plan A, which has a route. And in a tournament, you just benefit from not having to push against the tide. You benefit from being able to take advantage of the currents. So even if you're moving spots and you have to tie something and you can't pedal and steer or whatever at the same time, at least you're going in the right direction. If you have both hands on something, you have to tie another FG knot or something like that. So I do that, but I try to create a route that also has a series of spots B and C along the way, so that I don't end up saying, okay, well, this is not going to work. This plan isn't going to work. So I'm going to pick up and I'm going to head 3 miles now against the current and get to plan B. I try not to do that. I'm not saying that doesn't happen from time to time. There's just some times where it's a terrible launch time, but, in relation to tides, but yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about gear. We have to talk about your gear.
We will. I want to touch on something you just said.
Yeah.
You said the plan, talking about ABC. I even had to write it down so I wouldn't forget it. And ABC, all those plans are important. But my man, Cody Jackson even said it here in the chat. Tournament fishing comes down to the basics of knowing how to match spots with the conditions.
Yeah.
Cody's exactly right. Sometimes, like the day of the event that I'm just talking about, I went back to go fish that area and I only got a 26-inch fish. I also got punched in the face that morning with 20-mile-an-hour winds, rain, the wind coming completely, it was coming directly out of the east, and I'm launching almost at the mouth of the St. John's River. Like I'm getting it head on, and I got to cross the St. John's. So, that just put me in a bad spot right out the gate. So my conditions changed. Therefore, everything I'd found in practice in completely different conditions, all bets were off. My plan A, B, and C for what I'd planned for were gone. That was shot. I even went with it. That insider report's coming out this Thursday, so everybody will be able to see that and they've already seen the practice day, so they'll be able to see how it didn't really work. Sometimes it's like that, and you have to play the conditions that you're given that day, because sometimes the best preparation on the water really doesn't matter. That plan doesn't matter. You got to fish what you're given. And another thing you said that I feel like is important is, you said something, tying knots and stuff, when you're moving and, using the conditions to your advantage. You never want to be, I'm going to say this poorly, but you never want to be doing nothing. You never, right. If you're only trying to move water, you're wasting time. If the route you're going is an unproductive zone, you're wasting time. If you have an opportunity to move through an area where fish could be and throw a topwater while you cover water, which a topwater is a great lure to throw while you move, because you have gaps of slack in the action with your natural twitch from a walk the dog action. So every time for me in a kayak, every pedal I take is me just gaining up that little bit of line that I've just twitched in my topwater. So that's one of the things I do when I'm moving, and I catch a lot of fish like that, and granted, they may not always be my winning fish, but that's a fish that helped me get on the board, or that's a fish that, helped me call, or, helped in some kind of way. If you don't have a bait in the water, you're missing out. You're messing up, because you can't win if you don't have a hook in the water.
I absolutely agree. I typically don't move spots down the intercoastal. I'll cut through creeks and I'll troll through them at the very least. I very rarely move anywhere without trolling if I'm going to be doing something else. You get a text and you're going to return it. All right, well, I'm trolling first, and then I'll answer the text. So at least I have the line out. If I have to tie a knot, I throw the other rod over the other side, and I got my backup line trolling until I'm done, and then I'll start tossing as I go through these different areas. But it's a good point. You have a finite amount of time on the water, and I'll use this as an example, Matt. My biggest fluke this year, I was dead sticking it while I was rigging up the rod that I actually wanted to use. I put the other one down. I was like, all right, I know I'm going to be drifting down through a pretty, not a great spot, but a productive area, could be productive. I dropped it over and I just put it in the rod holder, and I'm just drifting down, tying it off. And just as I finished tying the loop knot, I get a hit on there and I pull in my biggest fluke of the year so far. Now, if that had been a tournament, what a waste it would have been to have floated over that fish and not had a shot at it just because I wanted to change to a lighter bucktail, So I'm 100% with you on that. But we do have to talk about gear. We have to talk about gear and what you bring. We don't have to go into the specifics. Now, I know that everybody knows you carry 8 rods at a time. I don't know how you fit that. And actually, here's a question. Say 8 rods in the back. Does that mean you have 9, including the one in your hand, or you have 8 total?
Good question. I feel like you've been paying close attention and trying to do some fancy fishing math there. So it varies. I got to be honest. Sometimes I have a 9th rod, but that's usually in situations. I usually don't do that on tournament days. But that's usually when I want to test out some new gear.
Yeah.
And I got my confidence stuff with me, but I want to bring something to play with. to be able to, kind of swap in and out throughout the day or try some different styles. Or sometimes when I want to try a test on the water, sometimes I get out to where I may have found some good fish in an area. I'll do this in tournament prep. If I find an area where I feel like there's some good fish and I need to dial those fish in, and I want to carry every presentation I can that I think, I want them to look at.
Right.
Well, for me, over the years, I've gotten a certain setup for different presentations. So if I want to throw a wake bait that day, that means I got to bring my wake bait setup. If I think I want to see if they want to hit a popping cork, that means I got to bring my popping cork setup. If I want to see if they're going to eat a Ned rig, and I go down the line like that. Sometimes I want to see if they want to eat 9 things. So that means
right.
I'll bring 9 rods, just to be fair and honest, some of those are rigged up to be multi-purpose. Like some are rigged with a 3/16 ounce, weightless hook weighted hook. So that I could run a jerk shad on it, a bomber on it, or a mulligan. It'll run 3 different baits throughout the day, but that rod's meant to run that weighted hook,
Right.
So, they're good question. It can be 8 or 9. I've even carried, I think, as many as 10. But I've figured out that was a terrible idea. That might have been I had stuff getting in my way. I was making a mess.
Yeah, when it's tough to pick the rod that you want without having it. Well, you could probably stand up and stand on your seat and grab what you need, but I can't necessarily do that. I'm too big and fat, and if the waves are too big, and I don't do that. I only go out with 4 or 5, and my 5th rod is always a sabiki rod. So if I bring a 5th rod, it is specifically for catching live bait, which I found in fluke tournaments can be really good if you can get a spot or something, something large like that, and just drop that on a circle hook. That's also something that, you got to check the rules, because often you can only have 1 line in the water, but some tournaments allow 2 lines for kayak division. If it allows 2, and I don't remember if this one coming up is one of them. But I know one of the tournaments I typically do fish does allow it, and I'll just drop that off the back and just let that go when I get into the area. Or when I'm changing something out and retying, I'll drop that over and throw a spot on there. So you can sabiki up a spot within, 20 seconds usually. But otherwise, I'm at 4 rods. Now, so you use different setups on each. What I actually do is I have a bait caster rod with my primary setup, and I have that duplicated on a spinning rod with my primary setup. And then I have 2 backups. The one backup is going to have a jig head. I typically would have a 3/4 ounce jig head on there, where I'm going to rotate through all the different soft plastics. And the size is just the difference in the currents and depths that you and I fish. So that's my versatile rod. And then the other one I'll have kind of like my experimentation rod. So maybe I'll have a kicker crab on there, or maybe I'll have a spoon. I really like the spoons lately, even for fluke. I've had a couple of hits on them that felt really nice. So I'm thinking about maybe spoons going forward, but that's typically what I do. And that's why I have to retie a lot, because I don't have all those other rods that I can just grab and toss out there. It's too expensive, man. I could tip over real quick. I would cry if I lost 8 setups, especially your setups. You don't go low quality like I do.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I am shallow. So, I'm not so much in fear of losing my gear. But you asked how I carry 8 rods a little bit ago. It's with that Yak Attack
Black
pack. Yeah. And those rod holders even have little bungee hooks that will go over the rod. So if you're, do happen to tip over, you're not going to dump your rods.
Right.
You have you have a pretty good shot at saving your rods there. Now I did modify mine with a couple extra rod holders onto the side of it. Had to stagger them a little bit to be able to make sure I could fit 4 on each side. But yeah, it's how I'm able to get to mine. And you mentioned that you retie. That's maybe kind of where this came from. It's an old bass fishing habit.
Absolutely.
We don't retie. That's how I came to be fishing many years ago and grew up was bass fishing. And you don't retie. You just turn around, pick up a new rod. And so that's what I've always done. So when it came to inshore fishing and I wanted to try something different and I only had, 4 rods or 5 rods, I was like, man, this is not how we're supposed to live. So I knew I had to figure out a way to be able to carry my lineup. How am I going to attack these fish? But we talked about how in prep, I'll go with 8 or 9 rods, so I can have a bunch of different presentations to be able to figure out what those fish are dialed into. Now, when we talk about getting into tournament day, things change a little bit. I've kind of got an idea of what they were dialed in on most, what my most consistent baits were, and I'll usually have maybe like a top 3, I'll know what bait was most consistent for numbers overall. Like I'll know what bait can get me 2 fish quick on tournament day. What bait can get me 2 fish the quickest?
Right.
And that's what I'll go to first. Or if I think my best chance at a big fish is first thing, or at a certain time period, and there's a bait specific to that, that's what I'll do. But most situations, what I'll do is I'll find my bait that's most consistent and I'll try and get just any 2 fish quick. And then from that point, I'll move on to what dialed in a better bite, what started catching bigger fish. And you can usually do that pretty easily. One easy way to do it is just up the size of your bait. That's always a good way to do it. Another tried and true method for me is once I've gotten 2 easy fish, I'll lock top water in my hand for the rest of the day. It's lights out, guys. We're going to throw top water till our arms bleed, because I know I'm not going to get 6 more fish for the rest of the day like somebody else would that's throwing jerk shad or a paddle tail or whatever they think they can, get a good consistent bite on. But they're going to weed out 20, 22, 23, inch fish. I'm going for that 26. I'm going for that 27. I want that big fish bite. And I know if I can lock that top water lure in my hand or a wake bait, like some of you guys know I like to throw, I may not be getting those real consistent bites, but when I get one, hold on, Jack, I'm back.
That's the one that you want.
Bingo. That's the one I'm looking for. And that's how a lot of my success actually, turns out. It's because I do that method right there. I'll find my 2 fish quick, and then I'll make a plan, big fish from that point forward, which also goes back to where did I find the big fish in preparation? Were they off a little bit from the numbers? Were they holding in maybe a foot or even half a foot deeper? Sometimes that makes all the difference. Like we'll be so concentrated on a good bite at the shoreline and we'll just be beating it up. And if we'd have just cast the other way, there was a whole school of fish 5, 6, 7, 8 inches bigger on the other side, but that's just because those bigger fish were holding on the fringes. They were holding on that deeper water little deeper slope that's got some cooler water, or something like that, man. It's just those slight differences, but you got to pay attention to those things sometimes. And that, again, that comes back to that tedious preparation on the water.
Yeah. So we're actually coming up close to where we wanted to cut off. Just so everybody knows, we had said, hey, let's do like 30 to 45 minutes. We're already at 45, but I don't think we're ready to stop at this moment. So what are some of the other tips that you just might, random things that you found to be important to you when you're getting ready to hit the water or you're on the water for tournament day?
Know the rules.
I think that's a huge one. Yeah.
Know the rules. Read them, reread them. I'm guilty of it. I've had a few fish disqualified in tournaments. I've lost a first place finish because of DQ'd fish. So that this year and last year. So it happens, man. Know the rules to the tournament, and just be as vigilant as you can. Accidents happen, and sometimes they're costly, but just be as vigilant as you can.
Yeah, and I agree with the know the rules part, and keep in mind that there are, especially if you're a kayak fisherman or a land fisherman, there are a lot of things that can actually get you disqualified immediately. Like no warnings, you're just out. For example, if you drop a second rod in the water and you're in that kayak division and you're not allowed, you'll immediately be DQ'd. They don't talk to you about it. They don't say, hey, reel it in. You're just out. If you don't have a PFD on in most tournaments because of the liability, you're immediately disqualified. You cannot just put it on afterwards and all be in good shape. Some tournaments, you cannot cull fish. If you cull fish, you're out. That's typically, for us in the mid-Atlantic, fluke, because you can't really cull a fluke. Once you have it on that stringer, you're pretty well committed to it. So I did want to ask you, actually, you're able to cull your fish throughout the day. Is that correct?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Are you able to cull the fish, continually upsize through the day, or do you have to just keep it within your keeper limit?
Yeah, actually. So with most of the tournaments I fish, they're all catch photo release. So the culling is actually done automatically through an app, or when we submit our photos, or if we submit our photos when we get back to weigh in, we just show our two best. With the Florida Redfish series, we submit all our fish to the app, and the app will take our two best.
Gotcha. I wish they'd do that up here. These tournaments are all for the kayak guys, bring your single biggest fluke. I'm like, but if I'm catching, there were days where I've caught several over slots, so you get a 23, a 24, 25 incher, and you're like, that's a banner day, but you can only keep one. So it's the 25. But, if you could have just gone by total length, a full, best three fish, you'd have a shot at winning. You probably wouldn't win with the 25, but you might win with the 25 and the 24.
That's where you have to be careful of that. Oh, I'll get a better fish thinking.
Yeah.
I've known people, a good friend of mine who lost a lot of money to that very situation, caught like a 23-inch redfish early, and said, oh, this isn't going to be big enough. Tossed it over to the side. The conditions were terrible that day, and nobody else brought in anything bigger. He could have won a lot of money if he just brought that fish to weigh in, or submitted that fish. So that's definitely something else I want to add about tournament days. You never know what kind of day the next person is having. Yeah. Sometimes if you have a live updated tournament, like with apps, you will know what kind of day the other person's having. But if you let that thinking get into your head, then you'll definitely pay the consequences of it. And that's something else I wanted to mention. There's two other things that I feel like are important to tournament prep and just tournament fishing in general. Tournament prep is conditioning your body. Like I try and exercise, regularly anyways, but about 2 weeks out before a tournament, I'll start running, and I'll just I'm not talking about, 10-mile runs here, but I'll do 2 miles and at a, pretty good clip just so I can get my heart rate up and get used to making quick sprints against current or what, get my legs used to that, kind of extended, push if I need to kind of, pick up and move or, if plan A, B, and C have all shot and I got to get to the other side of the bay and I need to get over there fast. That's when the conditioning comes in. And again, back to when you're moving and changing those positions, always be casting. ABC, always be casting. Make sure you got a bait in the water so that you'll have a chance of hooking up. And the other thing that I feel like goes really importantly with tournament fishing is just the mental about it. There's a lot with things that go into, on the water things. You can get into your head so easily from a whole bunch of different ways, from analysis paralysis to trying to overanalyze the situation and thinking that, you need to, think everything through to the umpteenth degree. That's not always the case, man.
Yeah.
Especially, when you feel like something's just right, just go to the fundamentals. If you feel like you're in the right spot, always start with the fundamentals. Don't go with, something that you think should work there, that you think is, the perfect bait everywhere. Go with what should work consistently everywhere. Go with the fundamentals. And that's usually how you'll find a trend moving forward.
That's a really good point. I have a friend who overanalyzes, or actually maybe he underanalyzes, but he gets in his head. I'm going to this spot. I'm fishing I got a call from, and I can say this because he's not watching. Otherwise, he'll be texting me in about 5 minutes saying, dude, don't talk about me on there. But he texted me in February. He's like, where are you going opening day for Fluke? And Matt, that's May 2nd. I was like, dude, I can't tell you. I don't know the weather. I don't know what's going on, but he's got it planned. He knew where he was going. He knew what his plan was. And I'm thinking, you're underthinking it. But then a tournament comes up and he overthinks it. And he's like, I got to go to this spot because this is the spot. And like, that's a 1 in 1,000 spot, man. You could hit something that's really, really special in that spot, but you're most likely going to hit a skunk in that spot. And that's why we typically don't fish together in tournaments. He likes to go in these crazy. Now, one day he's going to win one because he's going to find that 1 in 1,000, I think. And he's going to show me that I'm wrong. But I think there are a bunch of people that they overthink it. Look, at the end of the day, man, if you can catch fish on a regular day and have fun without, your brain burning on overdrive, trying to figure things out, you could do it in a tournament too. You just got to stay loose, stay focused. And if you don't catch anything for the first 6 hours, you better believe the next minute you're going to catch your personal best. And that's the way I approach it all the time. Matt, I've said this before. I don't know if I said it to you. Every single time I make a cast or I drop a line in the water, I honestly believe that there's a fairly decent, now this is my delusion coming in, there's a fairly decent chance that I'm going to catch my personal best and perhaps a state record. And that keeps me dialed in the entire day. And there have been several tournaments where everyone pulled off the water. I didn't have a good fish to weigh. So I'm like, no, I'm fishing up to the last second and I'm focused up. And I've had fish to weigh in every tournament except for one that I had a fish to weigh. I just didn't feel like making the drive for something that was definitely like a 20th place fish. But I think that's part of it. Definitely part of it. So Matt dropped off. However,
I'm back, but
audio
I got a storm here. I'm sorry, guys. I got a storm that's just rumbling outside, and I have Starlink internet. So anytime I got a storm, it kind of messes with my connection. But if I turn my video off, I can still, I think it's a little bit easier for me to stay connected. So,
well, Matt, let me tell you, buddy, the good thing is we're finished. We've hit the end.
Oh, man.
So it's okay. It's a good time for you to drop off and the storm to come through. I'll tell you what, it's been raining up here all day for the first time in a month. So it's actually a good thing. So everybody that's watching, thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you got something out of this one. If you have any questions, let us know. You can put them in the comments. If you put them in the chat after this, you may not see them. So put them in the comments. And we'll be announcing later in the week what we're going to be going through next week for the topic. So with that said, until next week, get out there, get on the water, and get some tight lines.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days ago. Find us on the water if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today. For he's the reason why we are this way. And he put fishing in our souls to stay.